Hi, I'm Lucia Lee. I'm an educator and creative writer.
And I'm JT Neal. I'm an organizer, writer, polysigner, just a general geek.
And
And
you're
you're
listening
listening
to
to What's
What's
Wrong,
Wrong,
Baltimore.
Baltimore? We gotta keep, we're gonna get there, don't worry. But you're
Yeah,
listening to What's Wrong, Baltimore, our podcast where we talk about Baltimore
the issues that affect the people who live in it.
and the implications that they carry to all American cities.
Welcome. Hope you're ready to sit back and do some listening because we're going to do some talking. But before you kick us off, Lucia, how are you doing?
Okay, this weather is really crazy to me right now.
Yeah, no, like it's just all the way weird. Even with like it's going to fluctuate, it's still like mad weird. Like this is not These are not. These are interesting times.
Understatement, but sure. Today we are talking about Baltimore City transplants. So I just kind of addressed fellow Baltimore City transplants. Back in 2018, I moved to Baltimore. And if you're like me, you moved to Baltimore with your own personal ambitions, in addition to maybe like some general altruistic intentions. And people like us move through Baltimore due to positions, career opportunities within nonprofit, academic, medical institutions that are supposed to fill in what the government doesn't do, right? And then like these workers, they cycle through the short-term roles at breakneck speed, sort of like a fast food restaurant with like a crazy turnover rate. And like the restaurant only continues to function because the roles are then passed on to the next sucker, you know?
Yeah,
So then, here's me coming in with my idealism. When my idealism is met with skepticism and resistance, then I feel like we start to direct our frustration to the city and the people when Baltimore doesn't provide the thing that you came here to do, right? Inevitably, people will move away thinking the city is the problem. um, but I kind of wanted to pose a question to all other transplants. What have we actually accomplished here in the community? Like, yes, we are at the front line sometimes of surveying, but ultimately we collect our data for our dissertation or research, make some kind of impressive career move, hopefully. Um, and then we just like move on to a bigger city when a better opportunity comes along. So, in a sense, we are using Baltimore as a stepping stone for our own career gains, even if that's not the main reason we came here. From the perspective of students I've worked with and other native residents, it really seems like we're using them. Like perhaps there's some people out there where Baltimoreans, native Baltimoreans, have distrusted you in your professional role. And
yeah,
that's because our presence here, while it's only a few years for us, maybe, it has a very lasting impact on everyone who grows up here and continues to live here. If I were to turn that question to myself, what have I achieved in Baltimore City? I will say it does feel like a revolving door of culturally disconnected workers. Am I what is keeping Baltimore City public schools from paying teachers fair salaries and practicing equitable policies and hiring native Baltimoreans with actual skin in the game with their children that are being raised here? Um, because I'm willing to come here with my inexperienced entry level self and do these jobs. Am I raising rent prices and gentrifying neighborhoods? But I really had to humble myself pretty quickly to like how little control I have over any of these systems, like as an
yeah,
individual. And like looking back, I feel like I was kind of silly. I was like thinking one college educated transplant will be the tipping point for the state of education or medical care in Baltimore City. And like, not only is that not true, it puts a weird expectation on yourself and your job. And it's like, you don't have to do that. You can release yourself from this like stressful idea that you moved here to fix the city.
yeah. Like you can be a part of the solution, but you aren't going to be the solution.
Right. And if
Right?
you realize that, you also are releasing yourself from the disappointment when you start feeling like a replaceable cog in a machine. That's kind of like what I want to bring to this conversation, like posing a question to people who move to Baltimore. What is it that you're really trying to do here? Can we be honest about what we're gaining, and also be like realistic about like what really is the community gaining from my work? Yeah. So that was just kind of like my little opener thing for talking about Baltimore City transplants.
Yeah. And just for the listeners, because I don't think I've mentioned it yet. This is, after all, the first episode. Uh, I'm living in the place where I was born, Nashville, Tennessee. And Nashville has spent the past decade or more in a state of growth. There are a ton of transplants. Like, if you ever drive through Nashville, everybody who has to drive here for any reason whatsoever is like, these streets are crazy. And it's crazy because you've got people who grew up and learned to drive in Ohio and California and New York City and Florida and Iowa and Nashville and Memphis and all of these places around, all in together in a city that was never designed to accommodate their different styles and the volume of people that's on them. And that's just a visible way of showing transplants, right? Like, there are a lot of transplants around here, and they carry a lot of the same inherent, I want to say, issues.
Issues. I think it is an issue. I do think also the issue isn't like the transplant themselves as a human, but like the ignorance we might or assumptions we might come in with, maybe the disrespect to the people who already exist here, you know?
It's like, how do you determine when you are no longer a transplant? There are people who move to some place and eventually they become a member of that community. They become a part of that community, and they are equal in stature and weight and value and capacity as anybody, people who are born there, right? There are places where people are born everywhere and they're like, this ain't for me, right? There are some people who are born in LA and there's nothing about the vibe of LA that works for them. So it's, when do you determine, when can you be like, I'm a member of this community? Is there a singular set time? Is it is it a choice? Is it like a philosophy thing where you're just like, I'm going to apply myself to the city and county of Baltimore. I'm going to devote myself to this community. And if you make that decision, what are the actions that like make you become Baltimorean?
Well, I wanted to kind of add to what you were saying about transplants. I feel like the Baltimore City does do a lot to accommodate transplants over native communities. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
It's a little weird because some things just seem very like ill advised, like the Top Golf that they had for a little bit and then they went out of business. It's like, why would you have a Top Golf in the middle of Baltimore City? Actually, why are there so many golf courses in Baltimore City? That's a different thing. And I also wanted to make a distinction here between professional relationships and personal relationships. I wouldn't go around being like, I'm a Baltimorean, but I am someone who hopes to live here long term. And when I started to feel really like I am supposed to be here is when I started having personal relationships within the community. It's not like I wasn't doing like strong work in my professional life, but you can't take away from the fact that I'm being paid to interact with you, a student. I think it wasn't until like I have a happy hour I can go to, or like it wasn't until I have friends who live in this neighborhood or whatever that I could really start seeing myself as someone who could be here, you know?
yeah,
Um, and the issue is that a lot of the jobs and roles that people come from out of town to fulfill are very demanding on your time and your energy
yeah,
because they are supposed to serve the community and they're on the front lines. They like push, push, push because it's for a good cause, I guess. Um, and that means that you don't really have time and energy to go out and like make personal relationships happen.
yeah,
You know, a lot of people, they come in, do their like program at whatever university, their friends are within that program, and then they leave when that program's done. I get annoyed by some transplants, because it just inherently feels a little disrespectful. So
Yeah.
what I'm going to talk about is there was this Baltimore Banner article. It's not really an article, it's like a community voices thing written by this guy Kedai Lee. It's a commentary. The headline is Curbing Cities Violence Will Require Overcoming a Sense of Helplessness. So this guy works for RACA, the nonprofit org to reduce gun violence, and talks about running into resistance at his workplace as he tries to like introduce new skills with computers or whatever. He kind of points to the shootings, the Brooklyn home shootings, um, where like a lot of young people were murdered, um, and uses that to say like, how come no one's snitching? You know, how come no one's really like doing big things that are very visible to say this is wrong? Why are
Yeah.
we all keeping quiet? Why are we all just keeping our head down? Um, and I can see why it would feel frustrating, you know, to like run against that kind of resistance. You're here, you're excited, you're idealistic, and then people are like less enthusiastic than you, even though this is their own community.
Yeah.
Um, uh, I'm sure a lot of the people who see you, this like worker from out of town, has seen like multiple of you, people coming in and out of these nonprofit roles and nothing changing. So it's harder to believe that you are the one who has any answers that could be useful. I also understand it from that point of view. But some things I wanted to bring up about this that like I personally had thoughts of was this the writer is describes himself as first Asian American employee at RACA, a majority black organization. Um, and talks about how they, you know, he identifies this kind of like helplessness, learned helplessness, because his parents grew up in a society, it, quote, where education was so overvalued that they were completely ignored just because they didn't go to college. They also grew up in a China that was post Civil War and post largest man made famine. They were then in post World War II Taiwan. I tell people that my dad lost everything twice, once when his family fled from China to Taiwan, and again when he emigrated to America. Talks about how he has a different outlook because he received a research opportunity with his community college, then got a full scholarship to Hopkins. Then one day in like a computer science class, a classmate told him about a low cost app building course online, and now he can Google his problems, his computer problems, to figure them out. And it talks about like the level of self-sufficiency that he had to have because his parents might not be able to fill out certain forms. um, and while I really identify with that experience in certain ways, I feel like you can't equate the two experiences of like someone who grew up here and someone who comes from post World War II.
Post World War II, post like revolution,
Yeah,
Taiwan. Yeah.
yeah. It's kind of puzzling to me
Yeah.
uh, why this is being brought up because I thought this was about the people who live here.
Yeah.
And this for me it just feels like one of those things that I see happening a lot in nonprofit spaces where it's like I too have known struggle, therefore follow me.
Yeah. It is.
Yeah, but this isn't just like a hit piece on this one article and this one writer. It's just to like address general sentiments that I feel like I keep running into with transplants.
It is a good instantiation for wider held beliefs, which is fair, right? I think that is a fair because it's like it's true in like a lot of nonprofits outside of Baltimore, right? It requires a certain kind of person with a certain amount of empathy to care enough about an issue to be devoted to work. I do a lot of, my work as an organizer is very much it's very much in the I almost said collective justice, but environmental justice, which is a form of collective justice,
Yeah,
right?
for
Because
sure.
it's the environment is outside. Um,
We all experience it.
yeah, we're all subject to the dangers and the harms and the impacts of it.
Hmm.
But when you go to like a group that's doing work on this, you see the same kind of person and they have the same kind of beliefs and they're all empathetic. They all care and they all care about others, but it becomes a shorthand. It's easy to lose the forest for the trees, I think, whenever you're doing something that you see and recognize as important. It's very easy to be like, why do we have these blockers? Why is this politician doing this? Why is this community leader doing that? When they know that this is the thing we all need. And it's easy to lose sight of the fact that they're still a person with a whole universe, a whole world around them that's not centered and not set up in the same way yours is. So yeah, we're all going to be impacted by climate change. We're all going to be impacted by pollution. But people have rent to pay. People have to take their kids to things. They have to go to the doctor. There are all of these other things that come first in their lives. And I've noticed that the empathy of these people in these environmental justice spaces, it doesn't finish moving. It's like a starting point. They know that they need to exercise their empathy, but if empathy is a muscle, they're just picking up one thing and then they're holding it. They're not moving it anywhere. They're not shifting it about. And the most successful of them are the ones who like move their empathy. And they're like, I know I'm more upset that people can't engage with this for these five other reasons. And I don't ever blame anyone who's like, I'm going to keep eating cheeseburgers. I don't care what anybody says, right? I don't know if you've heard that argument before, but like, oh, we should change our eating habits because beef impacts the beef industry, the cattle industry impacts the environment in a very substantial way. And one of the big tips from environmentalists is like, don't eat as many cheeseburgers, don't eat as much beef. And people will be like, I like it. I don't know why I should change. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with their opinion. There's nothing wrong with that feeling. But you get to that point where you're like, well, why do they keep saying that? Like, don't they understand
Don't
the
they care
problem?
enough?
Don't
Just
they
like me?
care?
Yeah.
Yeah, don't they care like me, the most perfect and like fantastically empathetic human being who's like trying to solve this problem? Right?
Yeah.
Don't these Baltimoreans care that there's gun violence? Don't they see? It's like they see it.
Oh, they see it.
They see it.
And
They're fully
maybe
aware.
it's because they see it and know it and have seen it over and over that they know you don't say shit.
It, it it's funny to me because my first thought is if I really wanted to like go into Baltimore and be this hero, this savior, my first big question in like the situation that the author of this article is in is what are the actual forces that would stop somebody from saying something? Maybe there's a very specific practical reason not to go to the police. Maybe, and this is just, I'm just spitballing here because I don't know the specifics of Baltimore's police department, but seeing as how it's in the United States, something
Yeah.
tells me that perhaps the Baltimore police, not to besmirch, but perhaps they don't have a stellar record when it comes to like adjudicating justice appropriately, right? Like perhaps they will do something wrong, or perhaps they are more likely to do more harm than good. And the members of this community are like, there's no point in continuing to have these people here just for them to do something wrong. It's easier for us to just say nothing, right? But the author isn't mentioning that. The author is
Yeah.
just like, well, why aren't they telling the cops? Why aren't they helping?
I
And
mean,
it's
if
like
there's gang affiliations, then there's a
you
good
have to worry
reason for
about a
not
gang,
talking.
right? Like if there's a
Yeah.
gang affiliation, you have to worry about the
Your
games.
family, your safety, your
Yeah.
life.
You put away that one person who did that one shooting, well, even if the others were like, yeah, no, he was wrong for doing what he did, but we still have to shoot your house up though. Like we just can't have that. You know what I mean? It's one of those it's one of those things. I've never seen a single mafia story or a gang story where something happens to the organized group of people and they're like, we have to just let this go, y'all. We have to just let it be. You know, Tony was in the wrong this time. We just got to let it go. It's like, no, we're an in group, and our in group must protect itself. And that means if you wrong us, we have to consider you an enemy, right? That is a human drive. That's not even just gangs. That's just human society, right? Like, what is World War I if not just like a bunch of people being like, "Yo, you shot this one guy who was affiliated with us. We got to blow up your country. I'm so sorry." You know what I mean? Like,
I mean, never mind.
we have to watch out for the Austro-Hungarians. We have to worry about our hot takes lest we harm them.
Yeah, I see what you mean. It's funny what the um environmental activism and this idea of like reducing carbon footprint. Everyone should be doing this. If everyone didn't use plastic straws, then all the turtles in the sea would be okay. But we're not the ones who are manufacturing and pushing all of this stuff.
Exactly.
I also think there's a lot of different factors to be considered, like access to food, just period,
Exactly.
and like cultural foods. And also, if you're in like a family unit and you're not the one cooking and you feel weird about dictating to your mom, I don't eat blank anymore. you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a tricky situation. And speaking of my mom, she when she was in university in South Korea, it was, I guess, in the 1980s. So South Korea at that time still pretty unstable politically. Against contrary belief, America did not leave South Korea ever, and also America did not, gracefully like support South Korea post the Korean War.
People.
Well, there's still like very active like military presence in Korea.
Yeah.
So it was a lot of political unrest. There were these like student protests at the universities, at various universities. And my mom was telling me there was some kind of protests that the students were organizing for, and for in protest they were just not going to go to classes. They were just boycotting classes. The issue was that my mom is in her senior year. She needs to go to this one class to graduate, otherwise she would have to pay for another year of college. And it's not like she had a very stable financial situation either, because her parents had divorced pretty recently. So back then, Korean women did not have many means of supporting themselves financially and like working in jobs. So it was like a pretty scarce situation. She wanted to go ahead and graduate, so she went to class during that, university wide student protest. She went to class because she needed that diploma. She doesn't even remember what the protest was about, but to this day, what she does remember is her friend telling how betrayed she feels because my mom decided to go to class.
Yeah.
All that to say, like, where is that friend now? Is she paying any of the bills? Is she supporting my mom in any way? Like, if my mom didn't go to class and did have to do an extra year, would she receive any support for that? Like, I just think that people have this assumption that protest and like social justice is just a choice, but no, it's also a sacrifice. There's
Yeah.
also definitely a tangible sacrifice that happens when you get into activism.
Yeah. Absolutely. It is. I know that for some unknown reason, people get to a point where they imagine that these choices are happening in a vacuum, and it's not,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like your mom's case is like it's an example of something that I know certain organizations and groups that want to be like, we're having a movement against gun violence, or we're a movement, for addressing climate change or anything else. A lot of them are recognizing that that situation is a determining factor. Everyone cares about climate change. The question is, can they afford to do anything about it?
Exactly. Not
Right.
everyone can afford that sacrifice.
I have a friend does who's in organizing in DC, and one of their biggest points that they try to make to as many different people as possible is if you don't have childcare, parents can't be involved. If you don't have, tutoring services, you can't really get students because they have to live their lives. Your mom was not in the wrong for being in the situation she was in, right? Like, who's going to pay for this? I have to take this class, right? In the same way, you can't blame people for driving cars. How are they going to get to where they need to go,
Yeah.
right? It's a situation where the expectation that where you are in your life means that you can just automatically make a decision in a vacuum and just do it right. The
Right.
reason people don't vote in America is because they don't have time. They have to go to work, right? The reason people don't get involved in city council or, this or
Their
that
meetings
is,
are inaccessible.
or exactly, right? That
Happen
one of
in the
the,
middle of the day.
in Tennessee, we have the Tennessee Valley Authority. They produce all the power in the area. They cover 7 states. All of their public meetings happen literally in the middle of the week, in the middle of the day, in random spots all across their region, across 7 states. And no joke, their next like board meeting and listening session, where they're like, everybody can just say what they need to say, get it all out, is taking place at the same time in a completely different place, 6 hours away from a different meeting about a big issue that they are facing. And if I were rich and I had a personal jet, I couldn't be at both of them. Jeff Bezos, with his billions of dollars, couldn't even feign to be like, I'm here giving my content, gonna run and go to the other thing,
Hmm.
right? And it's like, this is inaccessible. People have to go to school, they have to go to work, right?
Yeah.
What kind of life do you expect people are living, right? What's the image of our lives that you think is happening, if that makes any sense?
Oh yeah, for sure. 100%. I think that there's a tendency to just call out capitalism and be like, that's what was wrong. And then what? Like we still need to eat, we still need to earn money, we still need to pay taxes. But why are we shooting down people for remotely building any kind of wealth?
Yeah.
Like I have a friend who's also a first gen immigrant, and her parents, they moved, so they like had to rent out their first house, and then they like moved to rent like a smaller space because they're just like empty nesters now.
Yeah.
And a friend who she was talking to about this was like, so they're landlords? And my friend had to be like, okay, listen, this is like property. They're not like buying out blocks. They're not like doing huge renovations. They're literally an immigrant family trying to build wealth in a new country. Why do you think they are the ones who should fit this moral standard? This
Yeah.
like idealistic high moral standard. They're just trying to build wealth
Yeah.
for their family and their retirement, etc.
Do you think is it good if I share my leftist hot take?
Oh yeah, bring it on.
I agree implicitly, explicitly with all of the negatives of capitalism, but I am high key tired of it always being capitalism versus communism, as if these are the only two
Only
economic
two.
modules that ever existed or ever will exist, and
Yeah.
everything revolves around them. And it's like
No.
my brother,
No.
it's like, my brother in Christ. These These are the two halves. It's the same coin. They're the same person with different haircuts. And it's all about exploitation at the end of the day,
Yeah,
right? And it's
yeah.
like we live in a society that is comfortable with some level of exploitation, right? And it's like even the stories we tell, right, are exploitative, right? Like I've never
Yeah.
seen The Wire, but is The Wire a genuine representation of what Baltimore is? Of course not. I don't even need to like further investigate it. Why would it be? You're trying to sell a certain narrative. People think Baltimore is, you know, the most dangerous place. So if you have a show about dangerous places, you're going to put it in Baltimore and then you're going to ham it up. You're going to make it worse, right? And there's a show about Nashville. It's not at all, it's not even representative of the people that they're like emulating, like rich white country music stars. That's not even the lives they lead. Like it's not even accurate to them. And they already have a life that is, it's very shootable for a TV show. And
Yeah.
even the TV show is like, this is not good enough.
I I agree that The Wire is not it. It's not like all there is about Baltimore. Um Actually, it's funny because before I moved here, someone advised to me like you should watch, this season of The Wire if you're gonna go be a teacher in Baltimore. But I didn't. I didn't, and I think that was okay. And now after teaching, I just feel like I can't. It would be too triggering. Like I really could not even. Um, but how interesting that The Wire was recommended to me as preparation for living in Baltimore.
Yeah,
Because I think there's this like undercurrent of a lot of media and like attention that Baltimore gets for being like this crime ridden, like dirty city with poor, misguided children who run rampant or something.
those poor unfortunate souls.
I'm saying that's not necessarily untrue, but people react to stories.
Yeah,
And that's the dominant Baltimore story. Um, and I find myself in like a weird catch 22. I went to a wedding. They're like, "Oh yeah, where do you live?" And I'm like, "Baltimore." And the person was like, "Wow, Baltimore, that's great." And I was like, "Is it?" But they're like, "No, my mom like she lived there and like blah blah blah." And so what happened was that I was like, "Are you just being polite? Like, why are you saying Baltimore is nice?" But also I I just like felt defensive.
yeah,
Like if they were like, "Oh, Baltimore crime," then I would be defensive. So there's no like winning for me if I mention Baltimore
yeah.
because people are gonna like, gloss over things and be like, "Oh, this one pizza place is great." or or they're gonna be like, "Oh man, that's I feel for you," you know?
Yeah, got to keep one in the chamber because it's always, oh, Baltimore, there's one good coffee shop
That I know
that
of.
I know of. It might,
Yeah, and I think this narrative is actually really useful for a lot of the nonprofit work that we're seeing because people like me who like generally want to do good things and care come from out of town chasing after this story of like they need help. They need
yeah.
help. It's very paternalistic and lucrative, if you know what I mean. Like
Oh, yeah,
people will move here to feel good about themselves and say, "Yeah, I served in some way the community in Baltimore for 3 years."
yeah.
That in itself, for some reason, people can like walk away from Baltimore feeling some level of like clout or like credibility or legitimacy.
Yeah. The easiest person to take advantage of is the one who wants to do good, right? The best way to scam someone is to be like, I need your help. And like, it is also really easy to sell to rich people. Like, hey, you need a tax break. You need to like
Look
absolve
good.
yourself of any guilt that you have for being rich the way you are. Why don't you drop six figures on my nonprofit? It's doing good work, objectively good work. And
Yeah.
look at all of these smart young people who are like, look at them over here at this party. They're eager and they're ready to fight the good fight. You should write us a check right now.
Yeah.
You'll feel so much better.
Right. And like the donor is always disconnected from the actual like groundwork.
Hmm.
So like, if you work at a nonprofit in some like entry level position, it's sort of like activism. There is a sacrifice. You will have lower pay. You will have a lot of emotional work to do, maybe a lot of like bureaucratic hoops to jump through, a lot of like day to day, I don't want to deal with this, but I'm going to deal with this, right? And that is a sacrifice. And again, that's a sacrifice that not everyone can afford to do. But when people have that like martyr mentality, it makes it so much harder to work in that environment. Because
Yeah,
think about it, like someone who is in a nonprofit, they're willing to like take low pay, they're willing to work ridiculous hours because they're like, I want to do good, I care about the children. Meanwhile, there's people who need to earn money, hope to put themselves in a better economic position through this role, and like this might not be it for them.
yeah,
This might not be how they can survive best.
right.
When there's a martyr and they're working extra long hours and they're working for less pay and they're just taking every, bad idea from the higher ups and running with it and going full speed, um, how is a non-martyr worker supposed to exist in that space without the boss being like, why aren't you like that person? Why don't you care?
Yeah, I
Yeah,
agree. I think,
it's rough.
yeah, it is really rough. And also, how do you evaluate it? How do you be in the position of that martyr worker and realize, wait a minute, I'm martyring myself. I'm doing harm to myself for the greater good, but the greater good isn't actually like moving, busting our chops, busting our humps to do what we think is right, but we make no money and it's just like emotionally taxing and the problem's not being solved, right? Because I feel like when you get to the point where you're like, I'm the savior, I can save this, you reach that point where you're like, this is not, the needle's not moving. Why isn't the needle moving?
Okay, so that's what I wanted to get at because this person who wrote the Baltimore Banner article, they're looking at it from like a nonprofit, working against gun violence kind of way. The question he's asking is why is no one doing anything about the shooting that happened? Why is no one saying anything? Why is no one trying anything? Why is everyone dragging their feet? And my question that I think is at the root of it is why aren't more people doing stuff about gun regulation?
Hmm.
This isn't normal. This shouldn't happen. Like, there's other countries where gun violence like this doesn't happen all the time. And if we were to regulate guns in a way that makes it safer for our communities, then there would be no need for this nonprofit. Then you don't have to do this job. Then you're
Hmm.
not a savior. Then you're not a martyr. And then what's your use?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was gonna say Switzerland has more guns per capita. They have literally more guns. Like the density, like it's funny, but they objectively, like if you go to Switzerland and you just meet a random Swiss family, they'll have 3 to 4 guns in the house, but there's almost no gun violence. And it's like, well, why not? Right?
Right.
What are they doing that we aren't? Where they have more than us per person per family. Why aren't
Yeah.
we trying to emulate that? Why aren't we trying to do what they're doing? Because clearly what they're doing works.
I think there's a mentality of like this is just how it is, but it doesn't have to be. It actually wasn't like this. There was a time, there is a place where it's not like this, and that could be us.
Yeah.
That kind of goes to what I wanted to arrive at is that I have a lot of respect for my peers in nonprofits and in education. And I do appreciate the groundwork that is being done, the support that is being given. But there's a reason that we learn about white saviors in these like DEI trainings. But the part they fail to mention is that you don't have to be white to be in a savior mentality.
Yeah. Whoa.
So I think there is a need to examine one's intentions and role, even if you're not white. You could
Yeah,
still be a savior. You could still think like I'm saving these children, and that is condescending.
yeah, it is. I just in real time realized that movie, The Batman, from like 2 years ago, that's the lesson he learns by the end of the movie. He's running around being like, I'm vengeance. And spoiler alert, he inspired the villain because he was going around and punching people, right? And being just a mentally ill rich white man. But people didn't know he's rich. He's running around punching people. And like he literally reaches the moment where he realizes, wait a minute, I'm the problem. I'm not so much that I'm the problem, like,
I'm
I inspired
causing
this, but I'm
problems.
causing problems instead of being a part of the solution, right? Like he
Yeah,
realizes that he doesn't need to be the scary symbol in the dark. He needs to be a part of the actual solution, right? And what does he do at the end of the movie? He spent the whole movie in the dark, in shadows, like showing up out of nowhere. And at the end of the movie, he's helping people, like in the middle
yeah,
of broad daylight,
yeah,
right? Covered in mud, actually helping someone.
yeah.
And I I've been so busy trying to be vengeance or whatever that I actually haven't been helping the city. That I'm like, I've been saying I'm doing this for the city, but I've been doing it for me. And I need to start doing anything that I'm doing for the city. And I think we all need a moment like that if when we're in this kind of space where we have to start to consider, am I just being a rich white guy punching people in the face? Or am I
Well,
actually being a part of the solution?
that really goes to show how media portrays solutions to problems as like one man will make a difference, you know?
Exactly. Yeah.
One man stands in the way of total destruction or something.
Yeah. Because he, like, again, spoiler alert, he doesn't, right? They fucking blow up the city. But yeah,
Yeah. But that's always the trailer, and it turns out that it doesn't matter how much good you do, if you have low self esteem, you're still gonna feel bad.
yeah,
A lot of people, they seek something that like fills some kind of like emptiness or loneliness or guilt or something. Like they want to do good. People want to. But I think coupled with low self-esteem like Batman, it's it ends up being self-centered even if that wasn't the intention.
yeah,
Even if you do a lot of work, it will end up eventually being self-serving if it's low self-esteem, you know?
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Because he had some mad low self esteem. And it was unacknowledged too. Like he's just over here like, I'm doing great. It's like,
Yeah, I am
no.
the knight, you know?
Yeah, it's like I am vengeance, of course.
Of course.
Duh.
Of course. But you know, if he just didn't take some time to ask questions and go to therapy and stuff.
Yeah. That is legitimately a function of the plot. Like if he had literally asked questions and gotten some help, he would have been like, wait a minute.
There would have been at least like five different villains that wouldn't have become villains.
Oh, absolutely.
At least, probably way
Absolutely.
more, but you know.
I mean, there's going to be another one, maybe, I hope, because that was a good movie. So maybe there definitely will be more villains,
I mean, if it's gonna bring in money, there will be more villains.
naturally. Naturally.
Ooh, why does that ring true in IRL?
Oh yeah, it is
Sorry.
very true. No, no, no. You have touched the issue.
Well, I feel like we really went all the places. Do you want to try wrapping up now? I feel pretty good about everything so far.
Yeah, I do. Like I
Hmm.
think as we close out this episode, just want to thank the listeners for listening, and please don't forget We are here out of love.
Yeah.
And let us know what's bothering you, Baltimore, right? Send us an email. What's dot wrong dot be more at gmail.com. We've got socials at what's wrong
Yes.
be more and
Uh
our
huh.
Patreon. We'd
Hit
love
that
some
up, please.
Patreon
We got some
subscribers.
bonus content.
Like all
As a parting note, I kind of want to revisit this. We are here out of love. I'm here to learn about Baltimore, to like humble myself, and also just to like talk about how things that are happening here are so archetypically American.
you
And if we are able to talk about things in Baltimore, it kind of applies to like a lot of other things. Um, yeah, so we're coming from a place of like, let's learn. It's not like do this. If you take away anything from this whole thing, we're not telling you what to do.
Yeah, go out and fight crime. Punch
No!
somebody in the streets.
Don't. But yeah, we'll chit chat next time then.
Yeah. Bye everybody.
Take care, everyone. Peace.